Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the most superintelligent power, force, and source of love and creation forever. What's happening? Benton here. Shout out to Joe Moore. Peace and respect, Benton and chat. Indeed, sir. We are in south of Denver, Colorado, the Royal We. At altitude, I do get the altitude headaches, and that's okay. But maybe because I slept underneath the heater vents last night. I'm not exactly sure, but quite a bit of congestion going on, you may hear in the voice there. Quite a bit in the chest. I feel fine. A little heavier to breathe. And then again, of course, the altitude probably has more to do with that. The thinner air. Although 5,000 feet, it's not really that much. And it reminds me of driving back from Southern California on I-40 and then remembering at a certain point why the last time I took I-40, I had decided not to take I-40 and instead take I-10 to I-20 was because of the elevation. And in fact, quite a bit higher than 5,000 for much of that drive. So it was 2 to 3 days of, feeling poorly and headaches and such. I feel fine overall, but a little bit of something going on in the nasal passages. And then the presumed lack of humidity. As far as truck driving, managed to make the day. Drove about 10 hours. We had some snow. We had some blowing snow, and fortunately not many vehicles on the road on I-70, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't really slick. Mostly the snow would make it hard to see at times, the snow getting blown up off the roadway, and then headed to a cross dock warehouse in Denver, which fortunately wasn't difficult to back into at all, and the side street that was necessary, to utilize to back in and make maneuvers. The traffic seemed to understand what was going on, so it wasn't bad or dangerous. I've certainly backed in off of some highways that were quite dangerous, high speed traffic and such. This was not that, but and then here's the again, undiagnosed fake autism or the neurodivergence or just the common sense, conventional wisdom, word of mouthing. It turned out that the freight that was on the ass end of the trailer, these 2 crates, what was happening was that was getting removed onto the dock into the warehouse just long enough for me to go make one of the 2 deliveries of products, I believe overhead door parts, one going to a business in the Denver area, and then the rest of it going to El Paso, Texas. And then so after that delivery was made, going back to the warehouse to have the boxes loaded back onto the trailer, which presumably will then be delivered somewhere in the general vicinity of El Paso. But I swapped trailers with another driver, so that he could make the delivery in El Paso today, since that's a dedicated customer. And I guess that's, I don't know, 3-4 hour drive from here. I don't exactly know. So he was in a big fat hurry. We ended up swapping trailers while I was still backed into the very busy warehouse dock. So that was a bit of a no-no, but that's one of those, easier to ask forgiveness than permission type situations. So we got that taken care of. And then I failed to realize that the tandems weren't all the way to the forward on this empty trailer. So I did some sidewalk surfing because this turn I made leaving out of this warehouse, I had already made that turn, and it was close, but I made an even wider turn this time, and I look in my mirror, and there's my trailer up in the air about to hit a metal pole, But fortunately, we cleared it. But then later realized, I didn't bother to check to see where these tandems were. I guess the previous driver, he got unloaded and then took off in such a hurry. He didn't bother to slide the tandem. I still would have slid them if it had been me, but makes for sharper turns and maneuvers. But still on me. Fortunately, nothing was harmed that I've been able to. And always go slow. I always go slow through those maneuvers. So, yeah, the traffic gets annoyed, but dragging the tires over a tall curb at 2 miles an hour, not a big deal. Could be a big deal at 15 though. Get into bent rims and such. Maybe even blow up a tire if there's a heavy load in the trailer. But yeah, we're still at the truck stop, off to get loaded at 7 a.m. And where's the coffee? This is quite the headache. Probably not even a coffee headache, but go ahead and grab the coffee. As folks, I guess, ease back into whatever their normal routines are. Of course, it's officially the holidays, right? Thanksgiving seemed to be a bit of a nothing burger as far as I can tell. It's almost like it didn't happen at all. Um, I posted on my community tab or my post tab. Not a huge fan of Gavin McInnes, um, or Anthony Cumia, actually, but I do like Anthony as far as he's a likable person, but he's gotten a little too heavy into the political stuff for me. He's a bit of a dirtbag, of course, but it makes some really good points around modernity and how people interact with their phones, and of course that includes me interacting with my phone as well, and sort of laughing at myself in panic if I happen to leave it behind somewhere, especially in truck driving. I don't even, I don't have my phone backed up or any way to. Probably I could have it set up to use eSIM or whatever on one of these other phones if I lost my main phone. But either way, so that's kind of interesting if anybody wants to get into that. But somebody in the comments, of course, the first comment I see is about how it's not really true, because they're talking at first about how even I guess Gavin went and had Thanksgiving with his relatives, and talking about pretty much everybody between the ages of like 5 and 75 is glued to their phones the whole time, sitting around the living room. And of course, the first commenter is all about, oh, well, my 65-year-old dad does this, that, and the third. And it's people's own denial, right? Delusional and in denial. So, of course, I post into the comments, well, in fact, if your father had never been born, things would be almost exactly as they are. The world would be almost exactly as it is. So what, which then implies, without saying it, that what your father may or may not do is really it's apropos of nothing. How your father uses his phone, more or less apropos of nothing, meaningless, vacuous, right? the vacuity, delusory vacuity of this world of death, game of lies. Having thoughts about what's next, assuming this truck driving stint will end. I mean, I really don't know. I sort of prefer not knowing at this point, because it's possible the next load goes to general vicinity of Indianapolis, which ain't too far from Chicago. As far as I know, what were those noises? Old man noises. As far as it seems possible that I'll get there, and by the time I get there, there will be some kind of emergency will have happened. There's always things falling through the cracks, and they may need me to do something else. And say, well, it just, if you don't mind, right? If it's not too much trouble, could you, run a couple of loads, and then, then we'll get you to Chicago. I don't even really want to go to Chicago. It's, it's in my best interest to not abandon their equipment, and then to have, bad marks put on my record. I don't really care at this point. I could exit truck driving entirely and be fine with it. And I've been that way for a while, certainly. But, and then the puzzling, the thing about let's not move on to W-2 just yet, the idea of a W-2 employment. But yeah, for all I know, they'll just keep giving me loads. I have no idea. In some ways, I'm dependent on them, depending on how determined I am to avoid the abandonment. But then I also have to where it could be in my best interest if they keep running me, right, until I more or less insist on tapping out. Well, then I could pick an area and that has a motel near a Walmart, near a Greyhound station or whatever, and check into a motel, sort out my affairs here. Do I really want to keep the majority of these items that I do use, right? And clothing is a big one, of course. Clothing. It is winter time. Winter is upon us. It's about to be winter time. When's the solstice? It's December. It's winter. Good enough. But yeah, Chicago is not necessarily the area there, and I'm sure there's weekly motels somewhere, but probably nowhere near a truck stop. Where I could drop the trailer. There's a lot of logistics involved. I need to drop this trailer, bobtail to a motel, move all the stuff, rent a room, move all the stuff into a room, then return the equipment, then I guess Uber. Last time I tried to use Uber, it would not work with my debit card. So I don't know if I can even take an Uber. And then somehow, maybe city bus, I don't fucking know, get back to the motel. And I've tried this process before of sorting out the items, and it just doesn't work when I have a vehicle. So now, sans vehicle, now it actually gets serious, the pruning of the items. I've gotten down to what I thought I would be willing to try to carry, and it's just way too much stuff. Do I really want to go back into training to be able to carry a certain amount of weight, everywhere I go on my back? And I burned out on it. It was fun for years to carry a certain amount of weight everywhere, but I'm over it. Enough's enough. Now we get into rolly cart territory, and can't get on the Greyhound with that, I don't think. Probably not. They do have that Greyhound, because I'm thinking about going to Memphis maybe, but they've got that Greyhound used to have a parcel service, so I might be able to box everything up and have it sent ahead of me or whatever. I don't know. Now it's like almost like a steamship voyage, right? It's kind of funny. Or there's always the YOLO of just, well, here's what I can here's the maximum amount of clothes I can wear based on how cold it is, and then here's a backpack that I'm willing to carry the weight of, and everything else just gets left next to a dumpster somewhere. That's always a possibility. This truck stop I'm parked at is unique in that it's probably the only truck stop that I know of with a natural grocers nearby. Natural grocers has some really good prices on certain items. I got a screaming deal on a pound of yerba mate, which can be difficult to find in stores. Um, and then, of course, Whole Foods carries it, but they only have one brand, and it's okay, but it's not my preferred, and it's expensive for what it is. And got my actual dark chocolate, not the Walmart bullshit cocoa powder version, the actual real deal cocoa bean version. 3 bars of that. So yeah, we're doing good. Almost went to Walmart, but the fatigue, man, the fatigue is a thing. And thought about having it delivered, but looking at the $20 fee, knowing that most likely I'm leaving this job. Plus, here's the wrinkle: this thing delivers Wednesday, um, unless there's delays, and I won't know until Thursday if they're going to pay me or not. Thursday night probably. So who even knows? So not that I can't afford things, but it's like, yeah, let's maybe not just willy nilly start blowing $20 here and there. $18 to park last night, which is interesting because I like when they have paid parking because then I know I can reserve it ahead of time. But I don't think the place even filled up last night. Now, coming off the holiday, that's probably not that unheard of, but whatever that means. And we rolled right through the weigh station. They weren't pulling anybody in for inspection. They had us cross the scales, but there was no indication of even a hint of inspections. So I think what I think's going on is a lot of these states don't want to deal with this English language proficiency enforcement, and so they're just not dealing with it by mostly. And around the holidays, maybe the weigh stations are less staffed, perhaps. But in my experience, it's not been just the majority of them were closed. It's been that way the whole time I've been back on this job, but I'm starting to get the feeling that a lot of these states don't want to deal with it and are just doing the least, which is fine. I do have a mud flap that needs replaced, but that's all right. We ain't gonna worry about that. Yeah, I guess I got a bit of a head cold, I suppose. It'll probably be cleared up by later today. Yeah, I'm definitely ready to get back down closer to sea level and some humidity, man. I'm used to humidity. Not a fan. I realized when I woke up, I said, yeah, I really should have not slept right under these heat vents. This was a mistake. That was a mistake. Oh, I got some comments. Yeah, what are we talking about this wonderful morning? I don't know, man. Yapping and rambling, I suppose. Shout out to the chat. Ramblings and yapping. And whether or not there will be a spiritual sermon / discourse, hard to say. Hard to say. I made the mistake of listening to. I've been listening to a lot of people being sentenced. A lot of found one particular judge that I like to listen to. This, I don't know what state he's in, but might be Florida. But I think he's a northerner. There's a lot of northerners in Florida, but unfortunately, it was a horrific case of things that had happened to a very small child. In the sentencing, some of the details came out, and usually I've gotten to where I almost always just refuse to listen to that type of stuff for whatever reason. I heard it out. I think part of me wanted to hear the guy get life without parole. It was up in the air whether or not that was going to happen. But of course, that's what the guy got. But yeah, sort of wish I definitely regret listening to that on some level. Just it makes me think of what people go through, and then makes me think of the nature of the realm, and makes me think about so-called society, and just the emptiness, the void, right? The nature of things. And, hearkening back to a recent live stream on the Chalk Body Outline channel that I myself, so it's a bit disingenuous having not actually listened to the stream. And I'm probably just not capable of it at this point, for whatever reason. So we're kind of going based on what I suspect some of the points were. Sort of fighting fire with fire, maybe outbreeding the so-called savages type things. And this is literal waste. This is, some version of an actual race war. There's been this idea of breeding whitey out of existence, for quite some time. I don't really identify as a white person personally, but, whatever. That's neither here nor there. And but I was having some thoughts around that, such as I also listen to a lot of. There's this really good channel, Shields of Shame, although, again, not being into people and personalities until I am, right? There's a few people that I like their personality. That's, we're not saying that, but that's not the primary draw. They need to be able to have interesting material and interesting points of view. It's not just the personality, but the Shields of Shame channel. And I actively dislike the personality of the content creator, which fortunately he's not featured that often, but he's a bit of a bozo. But now in Georgia, he covers a lot of stuff out of Georgia. He goes and researches all of these, and gets a lot of these body cam and interrogations, and where the police are being interrogated, if they get decertified or whatever, all of these, and they have to get interrogated. And now, of course, some Georgia cop keeps giving out DUIs to people who are not impaired, right? But then it was this interesting thing about the video this guy played was body cam video, and it's apparently a 28-year-old on a motorcycle, a Georgian 28-year-old man. And, this would be, a certain type of dude into, crotch rockets, apparently. But then I guess sort of everybody kind of air quotes knows their rights by now. So right after he declared, so I forget the exact sequence, but at some point the cop's like, I got you at 70 miles an hour. And the bike rider, the 28-year-old bike rider, is like, well, I know I wasn't going 70, and I've got I'm videoing. And some of those motorcycle guys, they it has the actual, miles per hour, has some of the telemetry or whatever on the screen. Presumably there's computers that hook up to the bike or whatever, and it displays it on the video. And, so he's like, I got it on video. And the cop's like, oh, well, can I see the video? Can you pull the video up? And he's like, well, I don't want to. The guy either said, I don't incriminate myself, or I don't want to incriminate myself. And either right before that or right after that, he had said, basically the cop was like, what have you been doing? Where are you coming from? And all of this. And he's like, yeah, I had one beer at my buddy's house. So I'm almost certain he incriminated himself, because that is drinking and driving. I'm almost certain he incriminated himself and then said, I don't want to incriminate myself. Or maybe even worse, I don't incriminate myself. And this reminds me of the I don't answer questions crowd. I've never, ever seen a video where somebody declares I don't answer questions who doesn't at some point in the video answer a question. Right. So why even say that? It's the whole, am I being detained crowd. It's like, well, clearly, the moment you're not free to go, of course you're being detained. it really just doesn't seem to do anything asking those questions. Really, what it is try to leave. And if they won't let you leave, but they won't say you have to stay there, it's sort of this limbo. And I've played this game with the cops where it's like, all right, well, I'm leaving unless you tell me I have to stay. And they don't want to have to detain me. They want me to choose to stay there because then, it's less on them they need an actual reason to keep me there. And so that this whole back and forth where finally I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. And then they're like, okay, you're not free to go. Like, okay. And then I'll just say, okay, well, and then I'm being detained. And in at least one case, I pulled out my phone and started my stopwatch, my countdown, and said, my research indicates you have somewhere around 20 minutes to conduct this investigation. But what I don't ever do is I don't question their authority, and I just, I let them run the show. I don't, and this cop, the DUI cop, was even, after he arrested the guy, was like, look, I'm not going to litigate this on the side of the road, which is exactly, don't litigate it on the side of the road. I haven't had any dealings with the police lately, but what I've decided I'm going to do, especially without a car, if I'm actually not driving a car, is now I wouldn't be able to do this in the big rig, but the moment they contact me, I'm just going to say, hey, if you don't mind, could you go ahead and read me my rights? And then, I'm sure there'll be some confusion about why do you want your, I just, it seems like probably better for me and better for you. We just get this out in the open. And then, if they don't want to do it, I'll just pull my phone out and I'll read them. And then it's at that point, I'll just be like, yeah, I'm not planning on waiving any of that. So, I'm out of here unless you tell me I need to stay. And if so, then yeah. Why do anything? Why? But that can all be done. Now they'll feel about it however they feel about it, but that can all be done in a non-confrontational. What I've realized about these auditors and my, previous versions of Benton when I would interact with the cops is that I had some sort of, anti-authoritarian emotional space. Like I was upset about something, whether I knew it or not, and discontented. And most of these people, not all, but most of these people, especially the auditors, there's something wrong with them emotionally. They got emotional problems. Then surprise, surprise, most of the cops have emotional problems. Not all, but a lot of them have emotional problems. Lack of emotional regulation. But then what I find interesting in the younger generations, and this is where I'm going to tie it in with the breed whitey breed, is let's assume that this 28-year-old doesn't have any children, but then it's sort of the notion of, be white, conservative, knock up the white women, have babies, but then presumably do it with a strong male, masculine father in the home. Well, guess what this guy asked to do? Because, he knows to refuse the field sobriety, and good on him. And of course, the cops basically like, well, you've admitted to drinking and driving. And the motorcycle driver's like, yeah, but I thought, if I'm under a .08, well, no, sir, that's not the case. Now, the cop doesn't say it because the cop doesn't need to say it, but in almost all states, the laws as written is you can't be you can't be at a .08 or higher or impaired. It's both. And in fact, this same cop had arrested multiple people for DUI and just asked them when was the last, after they blew zeros on the PBT, the breath test, preliminary breath test. He's like, well, when was the last time you smoked marijuana? And then at least one of them's like, oh, I don't even do that. And he arrested him anyway, of course. And, this is all guilty until proven innocent, of course. And, so this is this guy's attitude is he doesn't believe anybody about anything. But, fair enough, because the cop's like, well, you admitted to drinking and driving, and, that's wrong, and society considers that wrong. And the guy's like, well, I thought you could have one beer and drive. It's like, well, I think that was more of the transition to, the DUI enforcement. There really wasn't DUI laws, in the past like there is now. And then you had the whole Mothers Against Drunk Driving and all of this. But then, so for a while, it was a notion of, depending on if it was male or female, pretty much anybody, not everybody, but almost anybody could have one alcoholic beverage with a meal and then legally drive a car if the cop could be trusted to actually, do the test properly, which part of that would be, the faint smell of alcohol, and one alcoholic beverage is probably not going to give people bloodshot, watery, glassy eyes, So just in a vacuum, maybe smelling one beer on somebody's breath with dinner, they're not then going to be walking the line and doing the hokey pokey and all of these things. But effectively at this point, no, you can't have any amount of alcohol and drive a car because, if unless, well, now can you do what Benton did one time when he got pulled over after playing poker for hours at a casino and drinking tequila shots in his car, and got pulled over only because I missed my turn onto the interstate and did a U-turn on a back road, and halfway through the U-turn, I'm looking at an Oklahoma county sheriff, and I'm like, well, he's 100% pulling my ass over, and wish he did. And I knew, I cracked the window, and it was like, I knew if I roll this window down, it's 0% chance of him not smelling the tequila on my breath. Now, I understand it's the internet, and people will potentially lambaste me for admitting to drinking and driving. That's fair enough. Certainly not proud of it. Not something I do anymore, of course. At a certain point, one of the reasons I quit drinking one time was I realized I would have to stop driving or drinking. It was like I can't do both. I'm gonna have to, and I don't. Some people have been confused around the trucking. It's like, no, there's no version of drinking and driving a truck because they can pull me over anytime they want and inspect me. I don't have to do anything to get pulled over. CDL, driving a CMV, they can pull me over anytime they want and search me, inspect me, put me through field sobriety, anything. They can pretty much do whatever the fuck they want if they're DOT certified. So that's believe me, if anybody thinks I've been driving around in CMVs at anything above 0.0, I don't know what to tell you. Now, did I once wake up and need to roll out of the truck stop and then start still feeling the effects of alcohol, and now here I am on the BAC calculator, trying to figure out what my BAC is, and then thinking, okay, how long do I have to wait to be legal to drive? And ended up being like 2 hours of just like walking around the truck stop. And fortunately wasn't late, because back then I wasn't, and I don't drink anymore, although I'm not sober. I never promised anybody sobriety. Even if we call it California sober, I never committed to not drinking alcohol, because I'm one of those people. If I want to drink, I'm going to drink. That's just what it is. I know myself. If I want to drink, I'm going to drink. It's just how it is. And so I never promised anybody sobriety, but for all intents and purposes, I don't drink alcohol anymore. But I knew that now, however the interaction goes, I can't roll the fucking window down. And of course, what's the first thing the cop wants me to do is want me to roll the window down. And I got through that whole thing without ever rolling the window down. And he, air quotes, let me go. Meanwhile, I didn't actually do anything wrong. But, so let me go, whatever that means. But, and then part of this is having the intelligence to understand he doesn't know my baseline behavior. He has no idea what I'm like when I've been playing poker at a casino for 6 hours. He doesn't have any way of knowing. Maybe I'm just excited, maybe I'm jacked up. Who knows? He just doesn't know me, right? So my behavior can't really be incongruent, and then, not slurring my speech and all of these things. But however, I'm the type of person, 1 or 2 beers, I might slur my speech. 10 drinks, if I've got a tolerance, you can't even tell I've been drinking. That's a bad sign. I'm one of those people, if I have a tolerance, I can drink 10 drinks, and if you don't know me, you won't have any idea I've been drinking alcohol, unless you smell it. Like, that's not a good sign. But go ahead and tie this into Drew's breed whitey breed. As soon as the cuffs go on, this guy starts panicking and wants to call his mommy. Right now, I can tell you this: when I was 18, I wouldn't have wanted to call my mommy. Right now, yeah, once they got me, if I got arrested and once they got me to the jail, sure, I might have called my mommy. The only time I got arrested as a juvenile, I was living with my parents. I was a juvenile, so I don't think I ever would have wanted to call my mommy, right? And who knows? That would have just been back then. It would have been calling my. I would have called my house, and yeah, my dad probably wouldn't have answered. But at that point, it's not even going to matter. Might as well talk to pops. Hey, pops, I'm in jail or whatever. They've arrested me. It's as bad as it's going to get from Pop's perspective. It doesn't even really matter. But this guy, and the reason why he wanted to call his mommy, and actually it was even before the cuffs went on. Now that I think about it, now the cop is pressuring him to take the PBT because remember the guy probably did lie and say he only had one beer. He said I had one beer at my buddy's house. It's probably a lie, but now he's getting pressured by authority to take the PBT, and now he wants to call his mommy. Now it's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and he wants to call his mommy to get advice. Hey, mommy, should I? The policeman wants me to blow into the blood alcohol machine. What should I do? Hey, mommy, the cop wants me to blow into his straw here. Right. What should I do? Like mommy's going to come down and fix it. And so this is your 28-year-old breed whitey breed from the South, right? From a red state. Maybe this is a Trump voter. Maybe it's not. I have no idea. Does it even matter? Right. Um, is this really so again, uh, like it or not, feminism has pervades all of society. Women as a group are already married to the state. That ship has sailed. And this is not a man. A man, it wouldn't occur to him in that moment. He would make a decision. He would say, well, I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do this. That's it. So the other day, when as a 50-year-old man, and I was this way when I was 28, I was this way when I was 22. After we already got to the agreement that I was going to bring the truck back to Chicago. Well, the reality is, this guy is running a business, and it's better for him if I keep driving his truck, right? It's just better for him if I keep driving his truck. So I could tell by the end of the initial conversation that, he would be willing to keep me as a driver. So then I talked to him yesterday, and he's like, basically, he's like, hey, based on our previous conversation. And I said, yeah, and I don't want to get back into that, which is really, I understood he didn't want to go through it again. He's like, yeah, neither do I, because we punched each other in the face metaphorically for about 15 minutes, right? This is two men just smashing each other in the face with haymakers, for about 15 minutes. Neither one of us wants to go through that, right? Metaphorically punching each other in the face, and I'm a pacifist, and yeah, that's physical violence. I will punch a motherfucker in the face metaphorically with my words, absolutely. And I'm not proud of it, but old Benton here is particularly mean in that. Although I don't get personal, I don't insult people. I don't get personal, but I am mean and nasty outside of that. Got a nasty streak, always have. But he's basically putting me to a decision. Now, I can do a version of can I call my mommy, which is like, well, I can go into this whole thing of, I was in extreme fatigue when I talked to you before. Now I'm not as fatigued, so now, maybe my attitude's changed a little bit. Maybe I'd be willing to just let y'all run my fucking face off until I tap out, which is true. I mean, at this point, what's the difference? I still haven't really rested. I think I've had 3 days in a row where I've had a significant amount of time off where I was able to just lay, more or less sleep and lay in the bunk, although not consecutive because last night I woke up at 10:30, or night before last I woke up at 10:30 and started driving it by midnight. But I've had enough rest where I'm still fatigued, but I was a fucking basket case when I basically told this dude, well, I'm bringing your shit back to Chicago, partner, you know, uh, and then we punched each other in the face for 20 minutes or whatever it was. Let me see what time it is. 5:30. Okay. And check the, I'm checking on the phone to see where the battery is. So, I could him and Han um, do a version of, waffling, but which is a version of let me call my mommy, really. And, but it's like, no, I'm a man. He's a man. He wants to know because he's the one planning all this out. He needs to know what's the deal. And so I just said, hey, man, I fell on my sword, and it was, hey, I don't, honestly, I don't, and this is the truth. I don't have what it takes to perform at the level that this guy demands of his drivers. We're just not there. Now, there are contexts in which I would be willing and able to do it. Benton, as it stands, I'm just not willing to work this hard under these conditions. It's really the pace, right? And I don't want to be one of these people who has to just go along with it, but then every month or so, me and him are having the same conversation where I'm threatening to quit. And I even told him that before. I said, I don't want to be one of these. It's like it's not my style to threaten to quit every 6 weeks. And he said, well, he said, he said, it happens to me every day. He said, every day I'm talking to somebody who's wanting to quit. I said, exactly. I said, I don't want to, when you think of me, I don't want that to be what you think of. Now the mean and nasty part, I can't really do anything about, but I didn't say that. But, that's important to me to not be viewed that way. Right. And just like picking up and delivering on time. And so back to the case of having to wait at the truck stop for 2 hours to sober up, even though I'd already passed out and been to sleep for however many hours, to be legal to drive. And people say, what do you mean? I didn't know you could drink in a big rig. Oh, as long as I'm off duty, absolutely. Now, the company policy is generally no alcohol in the truck, but yeah, it's not illegal if I'm relieved from duty. Yeah, it's completely not illegal. Um, if I'm on duty, can't be in the truck, meaning whatever's in the truck, you got to drink it or throw it out before you go back on duty. So, yeah, as long as the driver's relieved from duty, there can be alcohol in the truck. It cannot be there when the driver's on duty. That's how that works. But and it's important to know all of this. And see, here's the thing. Now I wouldn't even, not that I drink anymore, but there ain't no extra 2 hours anywhere. Now I'm almost running into poles because I let myself get in such a big fat hurry that I didn't even take the time to check where the fucking tandem axles were set before I blasted off to haul ass down to this truck stop down here to be ready for this pickup tomorrow. And also driving off the clock again. My 14-hour clock was done, right? No possibility of a split break. I guess hypothetically, no, I was out of time. It was totally out of time. So now we're going 1 hour on the personal conveyance. Now, in this case, it's legal. It's technically legal. It's because I'm going to this truck stop. But although even that's not a good enough reason, but you can call it entertainment or shopping. I've read the personal conveyance regulations. Very poorly written. It's a little too much up in the air, probably on purpose. Probably an intentional muddying of the waters. But, here I am. So, and I have no desire to work beyond 14 hours. And it's funny because it really was a piece of cake when I look back at Sun Transportation Systems. And some of that was, even though they had these Indians, they had this team of 6 Indian dispatchers. That company was more doing everything they could to get new customer freight. And so a lot of what was happening was they were letting these new customers sort of trying out to be there, trying to win this business, they would have me go pick up or deliver a load, and then I would just be there for like 8 hours, right? Or 10 hours. In one case, I was there 22 hours picking up a load. And so that's 22 hours of rest. Now, it's annoying if I don't know ahead of time that that's what's going to happen. But this company, that shit never happens. There's no sitting around doing nothing. I'm just not interested, man. I'm not interested in that pace. And in fact, yeah, I make good money based on the amount of my paycheck. It's not good money based on what they're putting me through. And yeah, the competitive side of me sort of enjoys, can I get all of this done or not? And I don't stress out about it because of the unlocking of the achievement, within the context of the world of death and the game of lies, unlocking the achievement of true knowledge of self/self-realization. Anxiety is dead, right? Fear is dead. And I know this to be true, but, now we're back to the whole thing where I can't, I need to be seen as a person who's reliable. I need to be seen as a person who's on time. So back to decision day, when he puts me to the test in poker, they call this putting your opponent to the test. It's like, hey man, just straight up, what's it going to be? So now I don't think I have what it takes. And he's already sort of let me know that my level of performance, while not ideal, is he was willing to accept my level of performance. So we've already gotten through. There's no reason to relitigate that part of we don't need to go back into that conversation. So he, man to man, he knows not to try to reassure me that, well, what you're doing, while not ideal, is acceptable. And I've already let him know, hey, I've got my own principles as a man. I need to do a good job for me, right? I'm not feeling too good based on my own lack of performance. So I just was like, hey, I don't seem to have what it takes. And it's not a passive. Some people would think, oh, that's a passive aggressive, woe is me. No, it's not. It's a, hey, man, this is the best I can do, or this is the best I'm ever going to do. This is it. It's not going to improve. It is what it is. Take it or leave it. And it's not good enough for me. I want to go work for somebody where my best is the best, one of the best in the company, like's been the case in some of my other companies that I work for. Not only one of the, either the top driver or one of the top drivers. Now, some of that is based on the dispatcher is on commission and they get bonuses and commission. And part of that is if I never go home, that's better for them. Right. So that's part of what factors into me being one of the best drivers. But so this is what I mean about this guy wanting to call his mommy. Look, man, a man would just say, no, I'm not blowing into that. Or a man would say, well, wait a minute. Let me ask you a question. What basically he would try to gather information. What are the implications? Right. Without trying to weasel his way out of it, and then get the information, make a motherfucking decision. Right. What happens if I say no to this? What? Because in some states, they just go get a warrant and draw your blood anyway. So what's the fucking difference? Might as well blow into the thing. At that point. And if he really only had one beer, right, and he knows he only really had one beer, probably to his best interest to blow into the thing, right? Probably. And they're not accurate or admissible in court anyway. That's just, it's part of what the officer can use to make their decision, ultimately. Unless we forget, the officer is certified as an expert. He is evidence. So if there's a trial, that officer will take the stand and he will be sworn in as an expert witness. So at a certain point, the 28-year-old is sort of questioning, well, how can you arrest me for this? And the answer is because he's considered an expert in determining if you're impaired or not. And if there's a court case, he can be sworn into a court of law as an expert, and his testimony will be treated like expert evidence against you, sir. So he doesn't need. So that's why don't do the field sobriety. It's mainly so you're not on video doing the hokey pokey if there's going to be a court case. Because guess what? You're probably going to get arrested anyway, most likely. There's a high likelihood of that. Such as we know when I'm driving, alert enough to drive safely, but exhausted, And it's like, hey man, just imagine if they gave me a field sobriety. I wouldn't even take it. At this point, it'd be like, now it's like loss of CDL for a year or whatever. It's like, well, there's no way I'm fucking passing it. Not to their standards. Now am I coordinated and all of this? Sure, but better than average coordination, yeah, sure, but come on. Fear makes cowards of us all, as one of my favorite coaches, Nolan Richardson, of the Arkansas Razorbacks, used to famously say. It is what it is. But yeah, guy wants to call his mommy. So this is your strong father in the home, Drew. And I don't really want to take Drew to task, and remember, society's no longer cranking out actual men. You know, there's a reason why this guy's grew up in Lithuania that I'm talking to on the phone. There's a reason why I grew up in a time warp in Southeast Arkansas, because believe me, there's plenty of 50-year-olds who ain't men, or if they used to be men, they aren't anymore, and they've got a mommy at home running the show, right? And so you're not going to have a breed whitey breed, and you're not going to be able to raise boys and girls in the way that Chalk Body Outline probably thinks he means. It's not possible anymore, buddy. So what's the point of making a bunch of white people and they're all raised by women, and it's a matriarchy, and it's female dominated. And I'm not even calling for the male domination over the female. I'm not even necessarily in favor of that. What I'm saying is, when America was supposedly this great thing, which I say it never was, but when it was that thing, or purported to be that thing, it was, God, man, woman, child. There was a hierarchy, right? And I talked to a guy from Louisiana, I think it was, or Florida, and he was a little younger than me. He was in his 40s, mid 40s, I think, early to mid 40s, and he was raised similar to me, which was, look, we were seen and not heard as children. Literally, if my father or my mother was having a conversation with somebody and I needed something, I walked up, stood off to the side, and they wrapped up whatever they were saying, and I waited to be acknowledged. And I still do that to some extent, because that's just good manners, right? And that almost becomes, as an adult, almost like a military type of thing. Now, yeah, I'll boldly interrupt some people if I need to, but if they're strangers, or if it's like, some customer service person and there's another customer talking to them, I'm going to need a damn good reason to interrupt, right? This is raising people correctly. So, and I'm talking to him, he brought up he's describing it. I said, yeah, seen and not heard. And they called it that when I was a child. And if the child couldn't control themselves, and tried to blurt out something, if it's not an actual emergency, they're going to get scolded and disciplined. Hey, man, adults are talking. What are you doing? The adults are talking. What's wrong with you? Right? That's over, folks. That's done. America's not going back to that. I hope people realize that. And so now you got 28-year-olds again wanting to call their mommy. Right? It wouldn't have even occurred to me once I left the nest. It would not have occurred to me to want to call my mommy to make a decision. It's like, well, now I might have been a bit of a punk, maybe not by 28, but I might have just been like, kind of a fuck the police type. Actually, I wouldn't have been. I would have, acquiesced to their authority, assented to their authority or whatever, but tried to get my way, of course, and maybe gave them a little attitude. I've gotten lectured on my attitude in the past, certainly. And I'm basically like, well, you're taking money to deal with my attitude, so I don't know what to tell you, buddy. It is what it is. I get to have whatever attitude I want, but I don't even get that far into it with them anymore. There's just no point. But yeah, that's where we're at. How is a society where you don't really have men anymore? How it can't return to, the recent past. Just not able to do that. Now, will this guy, apparently he met a woman about his age though, but he's talking about maybe he doesn't have any kids. He's talking about maybe wanting to have a son or whatever. And yeah, would he raise his son that way? Sure. Okay, great. Is and I don't want to get specific about individuals, but are other people doing their own, are other people making boys and going to raise them in a more old school way with a strong father and you know um, a mother, right? Yeah, absolutely. It's it's happening. The thing is, the reality is, if it didn't happen anecdotally, meaning if you think about just a hypothetical 45-year-old and a hypothetical 27-year-old or 28-year-old or 30-year-old who are married now and are having children and have children and are continuing to have children, if they had never came here, this place would still be exactly as it is. Like, it doesn't have an effect. I hate to break it to you folks. I understand the put your money where your mouth is. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. Yeah, I understand. It's not going to matter. It's simply not going to make a difference. Now, it'll make a difference in all of their so-called lives. Again, now we're back to the delusory vacuity, the hollowness and the emptiness of all of this. And again, it is, and they say, oh, well, Benton sounds like a nihilist. Well, I don't, who cares what I sound like? Point me to the external meaning. If he can say, if somebody can say to me, well, that's meaning in that when the being identifies all of these problems in society and realizes that, in some ways, from a particular perspective, the so-called mongrel hordes are, breeding Whitey out of existence. And I'm not saying that that's not a valid viewpoint. I'm saying it's simply neither here nor there to me, and I don't have a dog in that hunt. If I had a dog in that hunt, here's how. Okay, let's back up a little bit. Here's how I could have a dog in that hunt, and there's a reason why. See, now we get into fate, we get into predestination, we get into now for the first time in the stream, we get to waking dreams, surrealistic, unreality, deja vu all over again. I have a cousin who they intentionally held him back a grade in school so he would be bigger for football. Like the Benton family was just crazy for sports and football in particular. And Benton was born to the runt of the litter, my gigantic, scary, barrel-chested, 6'2", 260-pound father with fists like lunchboxes, looks like built like the thing from the Fantastic Four. Smallest of four boys. His brother that's closest in age to him is the size of an NFL offensive lineman, and not one from back then. He's 75 years old or something. I think he's in his late 70s. He's the size of today's NFL offensive lineman. Right? I don't think I can't overstate how gigantic that generation of Bentons is. Just completely fucking insane. Occasionally I'll see a guy like in a truck stop who's about the size of one of my uncles, my dad's oldest brothers. And you look at a person this size, like this is almost like not even a human. I'm just looking at him like it's almost not a human being. The width of that person's shoulder, you're just looking at it like, how is this even possible? What is this? But then that's a person who was also stronger, was also had better footwork, better reflexes, better foot speed, better athleticism than almost everybody else. This was my fucking family, right? Because surprise, surprise, whatever my grandfather was, the NFL All-Pro, I don't know that his athletic ability was quite that high, but my grandmother must have had it because and my father didn't get a full shot of it. He didn't have the foot speed, but he got the coordination and the agility and all of this and the size. But certainly the reflexes, the footwork, the agility. He just didn't get the sprinter speed. My uncles 100% would have played in the NBA without question. my dad's brother, who's a judge, probably could have been an NFL offensive lineman if he wanted to. Most likely, he's went to law school and became a judge. I know they say they said he was normal size till he went to college. Said he went to college normal size, and by the end of college, he's gigantic. So that's probably part of the reason he didn't really play football. But you know, and I kind of forgot why I got off into that. But so what makes the Benton you're listening to different than the rest of the Bentons is not only was I not encouraged to play sports, I was held back from playing sports. And if you look at where my birthday fell, I was young for my grade, meaning I was actually I was the smallest boy in school till about 8th or 9th grade, like no bullshit. I would have needed that extra year. So if I was born to a different brother, they would have held me back in school. And then once they figured out, oh, he wants to play basketball and he's good at basketball, he just would have been all basketball all the time. That's all it ever would have been. And some people respond to a good kick in the ass. I'm one of those people. And so could I have gotten a scholarship to go play basketball at the University of Arkansas? Probably not. Maybe. Probably not. Now, I don't know if I was forced to eat proper nutrition instead of being, the pickiest. I've never met somebody who was as picky of an eater as I was as a child, but certainly, if I wasn't ran through the gauntlet of a mind control cult known as the Jehovah's Witnesses, part of which was the religion says no extracurricular activities, right? No, I had to beg to be in the fucking band, right? In a minute, we got things going on in the chat down there, but that's all right. So most likely, and I think what I got onto this tangent by saying, in order for me to have had children, and to have raised them in a certain type of way. And so my path would have been through athletics. And then I would have gone to University of Arkansas, where my grandfather, especially back then, was a big fucking deal. And of course he was in a fraternity. So I would have gone into that fraternity as a legacy, right? And then now here's your business connections. Now here's your nepotism, Now here's your, oh, well, we want to do business in the state of Arkansas. Hey, here's our fucking VP of sales. And, he's going to, the salesman at a certain point, when the contracts get big enough, I'll be more on the executive level of, hey, we've got box seats at the Razorback games. And my grandfather was on the All Century team and all of this. Like it would become, my life and my business, right? And to then have children, and almost everybody in my family has firstborn boys. Almost everybody. There's only a few exceptions, I've got 2 younger sisters. I'm trying to think. I'm almost certain my dad and all his brothers, it was all firstborn boys. And one of my 2 sisters was the first. One of them made a girl first. One of them's actually never made a boy. The other one made a boy, and that's it. Made one boy and stopped. And yeah. But it's funny how the lineage works, because she can't make a Benton because his daddy's not a Benton, right? I'm the only one that can make a Benton, because a Benton needs to have a daddy who's a Benton, right? And I think it's ridiculous, this whole idea of this prominent family. It's just fucking ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face, but and nobody really did anything. Nobody's really done anything. There's been some amount of small time athletic achievement, after my grandfather, but Certainly there's some version of mental illness entered the genetics through my grandmother's side of the family, my dad's mom, and my dad's twin brothers who went to Ole Miss on basketball scholarships couldn't get their shit together enough to. They basically got kicked out before they ever got there because they were just more or less criminals. I mean, let's just call it what it is. They're more or less criminals. Just did whatever they wanted, and just nobody could stop them. In the old days, the police, what are they going to do? There wasn't a SWAT team. There wasn't. They didn't have. They didn't have tasers. You couldn't really just shoot them. Back then, even if you did, you better kill them, or they're going to kill yo ass, partner. Right? What do you do? You got to hope you can keep shooting them. It doesn't happen often. I've seen body cam or a dash cam of a guy who's about the size and strength of Shaquille O'Neal, just physically mauling two police officers, and they finally shot him enough times that they managed to shoot him enough times before he killed them. Right? Otherwise, he just would have physically. I don't even want to describe what would have happened, but he was in the process of physically taking them out. Right? Like, this was my uncle's. What are you going to do? You just going to shoot him? I don't know. It's crazy. So so we get into fate and predestination. There's a reason why my path went through what it's gone through. The Jehovah's Witnesses, which I never joined, and it is some version of Siddhartha or the Buddha, which is it was this idea of, well, he's either going to be this great king, because supposedly that Siddhartha's father was a king. That was sort of the reading of the chicken bones, the going to the soothsayer, to read the fucking tea leaves, was he's either going to be this basically the greatest king of all time, or he's going to be one of the greatest avatars of God ever, basically, is what they would have called it in some way. And remember, if this was real, and again, it's as real as anything else, I accept the historicity of the Lord Christ Jesus, and I accept the historicity of Siddhartha, Buddha, Siddhartha as Buddha, Krishna, is it Arjuna from Bhagavad Gita? Yeah, I accept the historicity of all of this, because just like whatever was posted in my comments about Elijah and God and all of this, yeah, that's all true as long as you're willing to solve for a surrealistic waking dream, unreality, deja vu all over again. It's delusory. It's always in the context of delusory adversarial, vacuous delusory adversarial realm of business transactions. By the time you get into talking about Elijah, God, Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, you're already in the delusion, or Maya, as I believe the Hindus would call it. You're already in the delusion. Now we're to delusory vacuity. You're already into the void or the emptiness, right? So to take, the very essence of creation, authority, expansion, love, abundance, and then to place it into a delusory void. I mean, it's what this is, folks. And what is happening is at the level of it's the consciousness of imagination, but it's also the consciousness of forgetting, and it's a consciousness of an ignorance to the nature of what the being is, right? And in fact, the being is not even really a being. Try that one on for size. And so when Benton talks about spiritual warrior genius, the genius is in being able to go through these experiences in this Russian nesting doll of contexts, and to put the puzzle together and to understand, well, it's right there in the Bible. When Christ was accused of, well, maybe he casts out these demons in Beelzebub's name. And then Christ's response is, well, if hate can drive out hate, then Satan's kingdom is divided against itself. How can it stand? Which the point he's making is, because he's not free to make the point because of the religion, the established governments and religions of the days. The point he's making is the inverse point, which is the so-called kingdom of air quotes, again, so-called air quotes, so-called God can't be divided. It's only ever an indivisible force, meaning this has to be delusion because you can't be here as an individuated being. That ain't possible. Not if you are what I am. Not possible. So now we're back to how I started all of this, which was the search for external meaning, because, oh, well, at a certain point, Benton's saying things that sounds nihilistic. And what I'm going to say is, show me the external meaning. Okay, go have some babies. Go try to raise them some type of way externally within society, and then present the meaning to me. And what I am will tell you if that's representative of meaning. What the spirit of what I am would say, well, the meaning was always contained within the individuated being, which in fact is an inversion, right? Because it's not even possible to individuate the being. So what use could there possibly ever be of bringing more individuations to the realm? I would say that only plays into the hands of the enemy, right? If we look at the example of Christ and we look at the Christ story, Christ, if you look at white race as Christ, the white race would offer itself up. It would say, here, realm, do your worst. Realm, here. Oh, you're talking about being being bred out of existence by the mongrel hordes, and I don't subscribe to that viewpoint, but I recognize it as a viewpoint, and does it have some validity? Of course it does. If you're willing to listen to me through the Russian nesting dolls of context, I'm not willing to accept that in a vacuum or outside of context. Absolutely not. That's ideology. That's crazy. That's ideology. No, we're not doing that. The royal, we ain't doing that. The meaning is always part of or one with the overall indivisible force. So what are you talking about? It's not about you sound like a nihilist. It's about, do you even know what meaning is in the context of what this place is, in the context of what you think you are, in the context of what you've been told you are, in the context of what your psychology is lying to you about and has been lying to you since day one, after your parents knowingly or unknowingly sacrificed you to Moloch's machine of industrial and post-industrial society. And are you willing, if in fact you are possessed of Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 spark of divinity, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, are you willing to unlock the achievement within the game of true knowledge of self, and then to walk the perfected path that lies within, to righteously bring forth the proper fruit by making the tree good instead of making the tree rotten? And are you willing to then, whereby you will come to understand, yeah, there can't be external meaning that has any validity in a fucking delusory vacuity. You can't have a void that's a delusion and there's meaning in that. That's the assertion of antithesis. That's one of the mechanisms whereby antithesis seeks to upheave, overthrow, supersede, supplant, and replace assertion, thesis, aka what people think they mean when they say God, the source of everything. You can't bring meaning out of the void or the vacuum that is the antithesis of that. So when somebody says, oh, well, you sound like a nihilist, I say, well, you sound like you're ensnared by the enemy. You sound like you are so identified with the psychology of the enemy, you can't tell your head from your asshole, buddy. That's what you sound like to me. So what? It doesn't matter how you sound to me because Benton, ain't the judge in that context, see? But two can play that game. And my apologies for the forcefulness of my candor. Let's take a breath and center ourselves. As that was a powerful offloading of emotion. So expert level breath work on display. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. And if people, this is the advanced course, if people can't or won't follow along with that, not my problem. But what will happen repeatedly is the mockery and the ridicule of you, the listener, of Benton, the performer, the personality, in the context of the performance. Oh, well, you sound some type of way. And that's why a person that I would like to, have some sort of kinship with or friendship or acquaintanceship or internet friendship with Enslaved by Truth, that's why he's now hidden on this channel. Because he will not do better. Because here's the thing. Eventually it gets to, okay, Benton, well, what's your solution? What do you mean, what's my solution? I've already done it and I continue to do it. My solution is individuals must do better, and I'm proving that by doing better. I've already done better. I'm continuing to do better. EBT is still here on what he was here on 5 years ago, which is Benton treated to mockery and ridicule. We're not having it. Do better, sir, or don't. I don't give a fuck. What I am doesn't have a dog in that hunt. Have you considered my servant Job? So has EBT run himself through the gauntlet of, have you considered my servant Job? Because Job was free. Let's not forget, Job, if he was willing to so-called curse God to his face, Job didn't have to go through all of that. Job was free to join the well, you sound like a nihilist bandwagon, and he was free to join the, well, you sound this type of way and that type of way, and to mock and ridicule, which that is the cursing of God to God's face. That's what that is, right? Blasphemy in the Holy Spirit. No, what I am will not, cannot, and will not do that. It's not going to happen. And if I'm wandering around on foot in Chicago in the near future, so be it. I can always jump on a Greyhound down to Memphis or whatever. It doesn't fucking matter, folks. I'll keep driving the truck. And it's sort of playing a trick on myself in a way. If they just keep running me and I keep thinking I'm quitting soon, I mean, it's sort of a psychological trick played on oneself. It's like, all right, well, $1,700 keeps hitting the account every week. Save that up. Maybe do something with it. Anyway, I think it's time to get out of here and look at delivering some freight or picking up some freight to take it to back east. So thanks for watching. Bye.